Have you ever had that experience, where you're trying so hard not to mess something up? Like maybe you're repeating, don't trip in your head, and then bam, you stumble over your own feet. Or you convince yourself you're going to bomb a big presentation, and then suddenly, right when you need to speak, your mind just goes completely blank. It really feels like you've somehow jinxed yourself, doesn't it? Like you speak a fear out loud and it just manifests. You get the exact opposite of what you wanted. It makes you stop and think, why does it feel like we're sometimes, the architects of our own problems? Well, today we're going to dive deep into a concept that might shed some light on this. It's this powerful, often invisible force that seems to shape our lives in pretty significant ways.
That's right. We're talking about something called the self-fulfilling prophecy. And we're going to explore not just what it is, but also the really powerful, often unconscious engine that seems to drive it.
The self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, sounds a bit mystical almost, but you're saying it's a real psychological thing.
Oh, absolutely. It's very real. And maybe the best way to get a handle on it is with an example.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so let's consider a case we came across.
Yeah.
A woman, very successful, highly intelligent, senior manager in a major city. On the surface, a life many would envy, but there was this disturbing pattern. She often came into work with bruises.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Her first husband, abusive. She divorced him. Then her second husband was also abusive. Divorced him too. By her early 40s, she'd really just had enough. She made this very firm declaration, like a vow, I am never getting married again. All men are trash.
Completely understandable given what she'd been through. You'd think that would be her decision. Final. Protect herself.
Right. But that's where the story gets up. Well, complicated. There was this other man, a friend, persistently kind, really patient, gentle, just the total opposite of the others. He'd been quietly interested in her for years. And after her second divorce, he became more persistent, more earnest in his affection. And eventually, she was genuinely moved by him. She decided, maybe against her own stated belief, to take another chance. They got married.
Okay, so this sounds like finally a positive turn, the kind of happy ending you hope for.
That's what everyone thought. But sadly, no. Just 2 weeks. 2 weeks after the wedding, she was beaten again.
2 weeks? That's devastating.
It was awful. Her friends, understandably, rushed over. And one of them happened to be a psychologist, actually a colleague. Now, imagine you're in that room. Your friend is hurt again. Your first instinct probably is anger towards the husband, right? Confrontation.
Absolutely. How could he? Especially knowing her history.
Exactly. And that's what the other friends did. They were furious, yelling at him, how could you do this?
But the psychologist took a different tack.
He did. While all the shouting was going on, he quietly pulled the husband aside. He just asked him calmly, can you please tell me, just in detail, what happened from your perspective? And when the husband started talking, apparently the whole room just went silent. The anger just seemed to evaporate.
What? What did he say that could possibly have that effect?
Well, his account was chilling, really. He said they were having a really minor disagreement, something trivial, like about dinner, maybe too much salt, something like that. It escalated a bit, like arguments do sometimes. But then his wife looked at him, and he said her eyes just filled with this familiar pain, and she said, you want to hit me, don't you? Just like my father used to hit my mother.
Whoa, out of nowhere.
Pretty much. He said he was stunned. He told her, what? No, that's insane. I would never do that. But she just got more and more agitated, almost hysterical. She started screaming at him. You want to hit me? Go on, do it. Hit me. If you don't, you're not a man. He said he just stood there, frozen at first. Couldn't process it. But she just kept screaming it over and over. Hit me. Do it. You want to hit me? And he described this moment where something just shifted inside him. His mind felt like it just blanked. His normal self, the guy who was always gentle, just wasn't there. And in that moment, driven by this bizarre, aggressive challenge from her, he threw a punch, knocked her down.
That is horrifying, just awful. And the psychologist's take on that, the mind going blank part?
Well, what our investigations suggest happens in situations like this is like that intense, repeated provocation, especially when challenging his core identity. If you don't, you're not a man. It can momentarily overwhelm a person's usual self-image. His belief, I am a good man, I am not violent, it got overwritten almost by her incredibly powerful stated prophecy, all men are trash, which she was basically forcing onto him in that moment.
So she had this script.
Exactly. A deeply ingrained script. Men are dangerous. Men will hurt me. And when this new character appeared, a genuinely kind man who didn't fit the script, her unconscious mind didn't rewrite the script. Instead, it seems she unconsciously steered the situation through that extreme provocation to force him to fit the old script, to recast himself as the villain she expected.
So she wasn't just a passive victim of circumstance. She was unconsciously pushing things to make her own negative belief come true, to prove herself right, even though it caused her immense pain.
Precisely. It's a twisted kind of logic. But her psyche got to say, see, I was right all along. There are no good men. And that right there, that's the core of the self-fulfilling prophecy. Once a belief, a prophecy about the world or yourself is deeply held, maybe stated out loud,
Yeah.
we seem to have this fundamental, often unconscious need to make it come true.
But why? Why would we do that? Why cling to a belief, especially a painful one, so hard that we unconsciously make it happen? What's driving that?
It appears that the deep driver, the hidden engine, is a really powerful human need. Some psychologists link it to aspects of narcissism, actually. It's the fundamental need to be right.
The need to be right.
Yeah. We get incredibly attached to our predictions, our view of how things are, even if that view is negative or painful. And because we need to be right, we will unconsciously push, pull, steer events, manipulate interactions, whatever it takes to make the outside world match our internal prophecy.
Okay, so this isn't just limited to, say, traumatic relationship patterns like that first story. This applies elsewhere, too.
Or absolutely. Our investigation indicates you see it everywhere. Careers, academic performance, you name it. Think about another case. A friend back in high school, super bright kid, genuinely brilliant. Everyone thought, Harvard, MIT, top tier. That was his dream, too. Partly, apparently, to prove something to a rather condescending uncle who had gone Ivy League.
Okay, so high achiever, clear goal.
Right. But despite all the potential, the grades, the stated ambition, he was constantly voicing doubt. He'd say stuff like, Harvard's way too hard. I'll never get in there. Or, I'll be perfectly happy if I just get into a good state school. Like UC Berkeley. Said it all the time.
Huh. So he was kind of predicting failure, or at least not reaching his top goal.
Exactly. And guess what happened? The day he took his SATs, he just had an off day. Totally uncharacteristic. Underperformed compared to all his practice tests, his schoolwork. And sure enough, when the acceptance letters came, he got into UC Berkeley.
Yeah.
Fantastic school, no question. But not Harvard, not MIT.
So it wasn't just bad luck on the test day. You're suggesting he kind of wrote that script for himself.
It strongly points that way. His repeated prophecy of doubt seemed to pave the way for that off day, leading him right to the outcome he kept saying he'd be happy with.
Wow. These stories are, well, they're quite something. They suggest this whole mechanism often leads us away from what we consciously want towards outcomes that are less than ideal, sometimes really painful.
It's interesting. The American psychologist Irvin Yalom, he once mentioned this observation he shared with his wife. For years, they had this sort of private game, trying to invite only couples they both genuinely thought were happy over for dinner. They could never fill a single table. He suspected a big reason was this pervasive, often unconscious need people have, not just to be right, but also more subtly to feel a bit better than others. He linked it to narcissism and thought it as a major obstacle to real happiness and connection.
Right. You mentioned narcissism earlier, driving that need to be right. Can we unpack those layers a bit more, the ones we saw in the stories?
Yeah. Based on our research, it looks like there are at least two key layers of this need fueling these prophecies. The first one is that basic, I am right. We saw that clearly with the woman in the first story, right? She needed her prophecy, all men are trash, to be correct. So even though consciously she wanted a loving marriage, her unconscious drive to validate her long-held belief was seemingly stronger. By provoking her husband, she could ultimately say, see, I was right. And crucially, it let her maintain her position as the innocent victim. The problem was him, men, not her own internal pattern.
Okay, that's the I am right layer. What's the second one?
The second layer is more subtle, maybe even more damaging to happiness and relationships. It's the need to feel I am better than you. It seems that for some individuals, feeling comfortable or stable in a relationship, or even just in their own skin, requires feeling like they're somehow in a slightly superior position.
Okay. How did that play out in the stories?
Well, think about the high school friend again. His prophecy, I'll be happy at Berkeley, Harvard's too tough. It likely wasn't just about being right about the difficulty. It seems there was also this deeper fear. What if he did get into Harvard? It wasn't the smartest kid anymore. What if he was just, average among all those other geniuses?
So the fear of losing status.
Exactly. The fear of being less than, of not being the top dog, was apparently so strong that it unconsciously steered him towards the safer bet, Berkeley, a place where he was almost guaranteed to reign near the top, where he can maintain that comfortable feeling of, I am better.
It's kind of similar logic, actually, to another case we looked at where someone consciously chose a partner they saw as sort of plain over someone they considered stunningly beautiful, a goddess. Why? Because they couldn't handle feeling inferior next to the goddess. They needed to feel slightly superior.
That need to feel better, even if it means settling for less or sabotaging your own potential.
Hmm.
Wow. It reminds me of that old story, The Knight in Rusty Armor.
The knight pretends to be mad that his wife drinks, but deep down, he kind of likes it because her flaw makes him feel more perfect in comparison.
It's a very similar dynamic, yes.
Right.
That unconscious, sort of hidden pleasure we might get from someone else's problems because it props up our own sense of self. It's incredibly insidious. And our research strongly suggests it's a powerful driver behind these self-sabotaging prophecies. We tend to think of bad luck or fate as something external, something that just happens to us. But these deep dives, these stories, they suggest that often, driven by these deep unconscious needs, the need to be right, the need to feel superior, we are, in fact, the authors of our own, often painful scripts.
We write our own destiny, but not always the one we want.
In a way, yes. Now, it's important to stress, this isn't about saying narcissism is just inherently bad. These needs have developmental roots. They serve psychological purposes, often as defenses, but achieving genuine happiness, real connection, reaching our potential, that often requires recognizing these drives within ourselves. It means cultivating a kind of self-acceptance where we don't need a hierarchy. We don't need someone else to be wrong or less than for us to feel okay. It's about moving towards a place where we can genuinely believe and feel that both I and you can be good, can be capable, can be worthy, without needing one to be ranked above the other.
That's a really powerful reframe. Thank you for walking us through that. So just to bring it home for everyone listening, the big takeaway here seems to be the self-fulfilling prophecy. Once you really buy into a belief about how things are, especially if it's tied to these deep needs to be right or feel superior, your unconscious mind can actually start working behind the scenes, steering things to make that belief come true. But gosh, that leaves us with a really tricky question, doesn't it? If these prophecies are often fueled by unconscious needs, things we might not even be aware of, how on earth do you change a prophecy you don't even know you're making? Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back again soon.